Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're so glad to have everybody here joining us. Looks like we've got more that have come in, and you guys are tuning in from all over the place. So we're glad that you're with us today. So my just quick background on myself. If you've had a chance, maybe I've trained some of you if you've been to one of our trainings before, or maybe I spoke at a conference session, or you've heard me present before. But I have kind of a different background than most of the people in our organization. I come to this working in education and working with strategies on how we can help engage and motivate some of those difficult to reach kids. But I have a degree in art, and I was an art teacher for a while, so I kind of have a teaching background with that. I've also worked in technology. I was the art director for a video game company, started another technology company that I built and sold. And then after that, I started this company, this organization, WhyTry, with a good friend of mine, Christian Moore. Christian and I are old high school buddies. We met back in our teenage years. He had moved in next door to me and was living with his grandparents. And as I got to know him a little bit better, I found out more about his background and kind of why he was living with his grandparents and just sort of some of the challenges that he had. And, through high school, we became good friends, graduated, kind of went our separate ways a little bit when it came to college. But then we reconnected, towards the latter end of our college years. And it was at that point where I was an art teacher and Christian was going into social work. He was just finishing up his master's in social work. And he stumbled on this approach that helped him to connect and engage with kids, working with them in counseling and in therapy. And it was this visual approach to where he would try and talk to kids and they wouldn't listen. And so he started drawing pictures for them. And as he drew pictures and asked them questions while he was drawing these pictures, he would process with them. And these kids that wouldn't listen when he just talked to them would all of a sudden zero in and focus on these pictures. And as he asked them questions, he would they'd give him answers and he'd write their answers at different spots around these pictures. And so, towards the end, after he kind of completed this drawing, he would ask kids, what's this picture about? If somebody asked you, can you remember what I just explained to you? And it was like complete recall. They remembered the whole thing. And a week later, they'd still remember it. They were remembering minute details of this conversation that he had with them. And he thought, okay, this is different. I'm engaging these kids in a different way than I do when I just talk to them. And these things that he was trying to teach them were kind of based on his life experience. He came from a lot of challenges. He was born with severe learning disabilities and a lot of challenges that impacted his ability to be ready to learn when he was in school. He had a pretty crazy home environment and a lot of factors outside of life that were outside of school that were impacting him being ready to perform in school, just things going on at home and things with friends. And he was, one of those special ed students that had severe learning disabilities and really struggled academically. And so, his claim to fame is he got a master's degree and became a licensed clinical social worker with about a fifth grade math level and a sixth grade reading and writing level. And one of his professors during his graduate program challenged him to write down, Christian, I'm amazed that you're here. Write down how, you should identify, how did you do this? What was your approach to college, to school? It's amazing that you've accomplished what you have. You should write those things down and share that with kids. Help teach them to follow your footsteps. What is it that you've been doing? And so that's what he was trying to teach these kids, and they wouldn't listen. And so when he discovered this visual approach of using a picture, kind of a metaphor for what was going on in their life, that's when he reached out to me because of my background in art. And so we just started playing around with these different ideas. It just became kind of a hobby for us, and it eventually evolved into what we do today, the WhyTry program. We have another program called the Resilience for Youth program. We have a lot of tools and strategies and resources that we use to try and engage kids in different ways. And we're always trying to make this easier and easier. So one of the reasons why we're doing this webinar today, this is both for our customers and for those of you that have never really seen WhyTry before. We wanted to share with you one of our core lessons and just challenge you all to go try it out, see what it's like. For our customers, sometimes we feel like they're going through this huge process of trying to get them trained and help them see all these amazing resources that we have in our curriculum, in our tools. But sometimes we just want to help them address a specific challenge or issue. So, in fact, I'm going to share with you what I mean by that. Closing a window here on my desktop. Okay, so I want to share with you just a little bit about kind of how this works for us and what we're doing, and then we're going to dive into some specific strategies today to share how you can address some of these challenges with students that are struggling in their decision making. And so this is our website. The tools that people access to teach and use anything that we have are here, found through our web portal. They're all resources that you can take and download and use when you're working with kids face to face, either in individual settings, one-on-one. Counselors and therapists will use this. They can be used in a classroom setting or small groups. And we've got lots of pre-built lessons in kind of scope and sequence that can teach all these different skills. But sometimes that just gets a little overwhelming. So, we have a resource here that's kind of called our skills and challenges guide, trying to identify, what is this challenge or what's a skill that you're trying to teach. So in this case, today we're going to talk about students that are struggling with decisions. Of course, I'm a terrible typer. I had a typo there. Let's see what it does. So it's recommending a section in our guide where it's going to talk about decision making and some different lessons that we have that relate to decision making. So emotional regulation, decision making and consequences, and having a future ready vision and self-efficacy. So these are 3 of our units. So decision making, emotional regulation, and future ready vision. So what I'm going to do today is go through one of the pre-built lessons here that is, it's going to be this part 1, secondary, decision making and consequences here. So I'll have all these resources, and these are all available at the end of the webinar here today. I'm going to share with you how to access these and how to access what I'm going to model for you today. And it's a little different than this. It's a specific spotlight lesson today, but it's taking kind of the resources from this lesson. So let me stop sharing that and go back to my... All right. Okay, so with every one of our lessons and these resources, we have usually kind of a presentation deck. We've got a downloadable resource that is kind of your lesson plan. So a document that gives you kind of all the different elements, what we're focusing on, instructions for this, even example processing questions, and how to process the metaphor that we're going to use as we teach this, and presentation decks. I'll go through the resources that are available that I'm going to share with you today. But this is my presentation deck for the lesson. And I always like to start off when I'm doing this. My background mostly is in a high school setting. I've taught this a little bit in elementary, but I've taught this many times in high school settings, working with kids that are typically really struggling. Often we'll have a whole group and a class full of kids that are some of the lowest performing, have worst attendance. They're just kind of disengaged. And it's our job to try and help them see the relevance of school and form a relationship and a connection with them to motivate them. And so I've always loved going in and using this in a classroom setting just to practice these things that we're doing full time, training educators and working with them around the country and and consulting and trying to support the teams and schools and large organizations that use our resources, as well as the individuals that use it. And so if I'm teaching a group or a class, I'll usually have a presentation deck that has the slides kind of prepared to take me through this. I'll either build it myself or I'll take one of my pre-built lessons. So in this case, that's what I want to share with you today. One of our pre-built lessons on this metaphor, a visual metaphor that is teaching decisions and consequences, or decision-making and consequences. That's the unit. And this metaphor is teaching that principle, that skill, through a metaphor we call the reality ride, a visual metaphor of a roller coaster. So I always usually start off with some kind of a question of the day, or question of the group. It's a quick attention getter. So if you guys wouldn't mind, let's do this. We're going to just practice this together. In the chat window, if you would, see if you can answer this question for me. If your life this week were a roller coaster, what would it be called? If my students, I want to just have some kind of question that sort of relates to the lesson. Sometimes it's just a fun question that's just an emotional hook to get them talking. Doesn't have to be specifically relevant to what we're going to talk about today, but I'm just curious, what would you guys say to this? Here we go. I like that. Jump offs. Hot mess. Flying ace. Awesome answers. Screaming out loud, I think you meant. Up and down and around express. Whiplash. Get me off. Mellow inconvenience. I like that one. Into the bitter unknown. That may be describing the weather, I think. The hot mess express. No thanks. Accelerator, one of those roller coasters that projects you from the start super fast. Yeah. Hold on. 7 days of doom. Too slow intensity. And help. Man, lots of great answers there. So you can see kind of how this goes with students. Usually this is just meant to be sort of fun. And, in one way or another, I think it gives us just a little engagement to maybe understand, just based on what they said. They may be joking, or they may be describing that this has been one of those weeks that's been hard. Life is hard sometimes, and some of the things we experience can be hard, and they impact us. And sometimes they impact our decision making. They can be influenced because of the challenges that we're experiencing. So this is just a good way for us to get to know a little bit what's going on in their lives. Okay. So then I like to start off with just a simple processing connection to what we're going to be discussing today, roller coasters. This is our metaphor today. We're going to talk about a roller coaster and how a roller coaster relates to our life. So you guys already, I think, can see connections to your life just based on the answers you gave me about what you would name your life if it was a roller coaster. So just out of curiosity, I'll say to my students, who likes roller coasters? Raise your hand. Who dislikes roller coasters? Raise your hand. Just quick in the chat window, tell me yes or no. Do you like them? Do you hate them? And maybe why. If you want, you can say why. So getting kind of a mixed response here. A lot of yeses, a few nos because they're scary. I can say yes to this, but with kind of an exception. I can't ride them very much anymore. I think the older I get, I just am more prone to motion sickness. So love it, but I ride one, maybe two, and I'm done for the day. Like I'm going to be dizzy and nauseous the rest of the day. So I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but that's my view on roller coasters. But so let's get a lot of you are talking about it. Do any of you, sometimes I'll say to my students, do any of you have a favorite? Is there a roller coaster you've been on that's your favorite? What would you say? I remember a few years ago going with my kids to Magic Mountain, and it's Six Flags Magic Mountain, in California, and it is just roller coaster central. There are so many different roller coasters there. They're just awesome and painful, and every spectrum of emotion that you can imagine. But I remember going on, for the first couple of the morning, and I was done, and I just ended up watching my kids the rest of the day. So we got Tron Light Cycle at Disney, Incredicoaster, a lot of Disney's, okay. Mystery Mine at Dollywood, interesting. Jennifer, you know what? The one you rode with your dad at Lagoon in Utah. Lagoon is a great roller coaster place here where we live in Utah. They have one there called the Cannibal, and you go in this elevator and it goes up, and it's really dark, so it's just black. You go in it and it takes you up, and then right at the top, this kind of garage door opens up, and the light comes out, and you can kind of see that you are up really high, and then you hook onto the track right there, and it just drops straight off, almost invert, and it goes clear down underground, then comes up and goes through a series of loops, and it is intense. It's pretty awesome. But they have a bunch. They got the old wooden one, Andrea, you're talking about an old wooden roller coaster at Family Kingdom in Myrtle Beach. They have one of those at Lagoon here in Utah as well. And you ride those, it's crazy how fun they still seem. But I think I'm more nervous on those, like they're going to break. It doesn't feel safe. But so, with your students, you can kind of just talk about the idea here. The more you can add color to the discussion of roller coasters, it's going to help you sort of frame the metaphor that we're talking about and make the connection to their life. So I like to just kind of carry this discussion in a light way, whichever direction it flows with your students. If they've never been on a roller coaster, that's okay. I'm going to share a video clip or two that kind of illustrate some things about roller coasters that will connect to our lives. And if they've been on roller coasters or they have a favorite, it's great to just get their passion to come out and talk about some of the things that they're interested in. And, just see how you can get them sharing and discussing. You start out with something kind of light. This is an easy, light discussion. There's nothing real personal. And you'll notice that as we get into this, we start asking about some things that connect to our lives a little bit more. So I'm going to show a little video clip here. And I usually frame this for my students. I'll say, we're going to watch a video. One of the things I'm always trying to do is work on my students' ability to put themselves in somebody else's shoes, build those empathy skills. It's such an important social skill that our students can put themselves in another person's shoes, imagine things from their perspective, what they think they're feeling, what they think is going through their mind. So we're going to practice that right now. And we're going to practice that with you all. So as you watch this video, try and imagine what this kid is thinking and feeling as he's going through this ride, or as he's going on this roller coaster. This looks like is probably the first time he's ever been on a roller coaster. I don't know the real background to this, but I've seen it quite a few times, and it gets me every time. It's really pretty interesting to watch. But I want you, as you watch it, just try and pay attention to what you think is going on and what you're observing in his emotions and his thoughts. So here it is. Okay, I'm just going to pause it there for a second. In the chat window, what are your observations? What do you think is going through his mind? What are his thoughts, his feelings? What are you reading in this? Okay. So he seems excited. Somebody said terrified. I don't know if it's terrified. I mean, definitely he has some excitement and anticipation. If you noticed, he was saying, we're almost there. We're almost there. And then at one point, he kind of was squinting off like, whoa, we're getting up high. He's looking over the edge and seeing how high he is. And he kind of went like this. And his dad said, are you okay? And he said, I'm okay. But that, maybe that gives you a little bit of understanding of what his body language and what his words are and his expressions on his face. And so, Yeah, you guys are saying he seems excited. He knows he's high up. He seems a little scared, but a little anxious. You're feeling that. Um, there's a noise in the background. I don't know if you guys were hearing that, but it's kind of a mechanical sound, right? That's the noise of the chain that it's connected to, and it's slowly pulling it up this hill. And then eventually, when it gets to the top, this is how most roller coasters work, right? It'll pull it up to the top, or at least this was the idea of a roller coaster from the beginning, right? Especially those old wooden roller coasters. They're going to slowly pull you up to the top of the hill, and then gravity takes over and you coast. We'll see where you go. So it's up high, and then you get to ride the ride. So let's see where it goes. Whoops, a little further here. I'm going to pause it one more time here. Get back. There's my favorite screenshot there. There we go. Um, so now what's going through his mind? Not having fun, right? Scared to death. Big emotional shift took place at this point. And, you know, if you think of look at his body language, what's he doing? He's gripping onto that bar. He's hanging on to it. You guys are all saying terror, pure terror. That is definitely the face of pure terror. Regret, maybe misled by dad, scared. He's probably a little bit frustrated. Dad, why did you bring me on this? You should have known better, right? I don't want to do this. He doesn't look like he's having fun, right? It's pretty easy to look at this and think, okay, this was a big emotional shift. Something changed immediately, and that is a completely different expression and feeling that kid's experiencing in this moment. Okay, let's see where it kind of goes out. Hang on. Are you guys able to hear this? Are you hearing the sound from this video? No, weird. Okay, hang on one sec. Double check. Should be playing the sound for you. Try this one more time. Think I didn't have it selected. That was my fault. Sorry. We'll go back to it. We'll let you hear it. We'll let you hear it as I'll just go back to where we just were on the video. And so we were right about.
Woo! Okay? Oh, going again! Okay, hold on, buddy.
I'm gonna go again. Go again.
Go again.
Yeah.
All right. That's crazy, right? I mean, you're with me on this, right? How in the world does he go from excited to just completely terrified, and then within just moments later, what does he say there at the end? I want to do it again. It kind of begs the question, why do people ride roller coasters? And so we have in the slide following this, there's some processing questions. Now we've kind of stopped and processed in the middle of the video, and I like to do that. I like to kind of frame it and set it up. If there is a good point in a video when I'm showing it as a story example or an illustration of what we're going to be talking about or what we just talked about previous to that. And so sometimes it's good to kind of set it up, give them something to look for. And then when you are showing the video, it can be good to stop in the middle and ask questions about what they're observing and process with them. But we have all of the questions here that I was just kind of going with you. What do you think he was feeling at the beginning of the ride? What do you think he was going through? What was going through his mind during those first two big drops? And then, what did he say at the end of the ride? Right? I mean, it's kind of crazy. How can you make that emotional shift so fast. And it kind of begs the question, why do people ride on roller coasters? And so, we talked about different roller coasters. Sometimes we'll have students share their favorite ride. Usually, every time they come out with a new roller coaster, what is their objective? What are they trying to accomplish when they create a new roller coaster? What would you say? Selena said the thrill. What do you guys think? What are they trying to do when they come out with a new roller coaster? They're always making new ones, right? Disney, Universal, Six Flags. Monica, they're trying to push the limits. They're trying to make it even bigger, better, faster. I saw a video, I'll have to go dig it up sometime here next time I teach this, of what is currently the fastest and longest and roller coaster that has the highest, climb and drop in it. And it's somewhere over in the Middle East. And it's pretty crazy. It's in a desert environment and they're going up these cliffs, like it's built out in just such an interesting way. And it is so long and so fast and it looks amazing. But a lot of new roller coasters, they don't just start out like that roller coaster the kid was on, traditional roller coasters that slowly climb and then let you go. A lot of them will launch you. They'll use different ways to propel the roller coaster. In most cases, they use these really powerful electromagnets that will, have this ability with electricity to launch. And so this is one that's called the Top Thrill Coaster at Cedar Point. Just kind of, if you want a first-person perspective of riding a roller coaster, especially one that's, trying to give you
Arms down.
a real extreme experience. So they're playing the sound of a rumbling engine like you're in a dragster on a drag strip getting ready to go. And it goes from 0 to, I think, over 100 miles an hour, just a matter of a couple seconds. Just watches, but then you can kind of see what's coming up here. Have your stoplight there up on the left. Watch that red. Go over the top. And a little cluster on the way down. Boom, finish. And we're riding. Pretty crazy, right? And then, you go get in line for an hour or two to ride it again. Have any of you ever been on that one? Just out of curiosity? I think a lot of times depending on where I'm in the country, some people have ridden that one and love to share their feeling about it. So again, just maybe showing a different video. We've got lots of links to videos that you could use to illustrate the metaphor talking about roller coasters. And so that's important because it just kind of helps set up your discussion here. So I'll share with my students, okay, today we're going to talk about a roller coaster. We call this the reality ride. And this may look like kind of just a simple picture here, but if you can understand what we're going to talk about and what this picture represents, how it connects to you and your life, and if you can apply what it teaches in your life, I think you're going to find that this is going to give you a huge advantage in a lot of situations that you're in the future. This isn't something that you probably will just think about once. This was something that if you can pay attention while we go through this and really have an open mind to this, you're going to probably think about this a lot. You'll come back to this and you'll think about some of the things that this talks about and how it helps you understand things about your own life. So what I just did there was kind of an example of what we refer to as framing. The way you frame something and pitch it to your students has a big impact on their, the buy-in that you create, like the way they receive what you're teaching or presenting. In a lot of ways is impacted just by the way you frame it. If you can frame it as something of value, and I believe that in my heart, everything I just said right there is absolutely true. If I can help a student understand this, it can be such a powerful thing for them and really give them some insight into their own life that I believe will be very valuable. And I've seen it over and over when I've taught this to kids, that it is something that they really latch onto and understand. And so I want to say that with as much conviction. If I said, hey, we're going to talk about this roller coaster called the reality ride, they don't care, right? But if I try and frame it as something important, it may look like a little cartoony thing here, but it's not. It's actually pretty deep when you understand what this represents. So to begin with, we're going to talk about the name. This is called the reality ride. So I usually say to my students, I'm just going to role play with you guys. So get ready to type fast in the chat window and give some answers. You've been doing a great job at that so far. So what does the word reality mean? What would you say? What's your quick answer there? What does the word reality mean? Real life, my life, the truth, what we're experiencing. So the present, the here and now, lots of good answers there. So with students, sometimes I'll just let them kind of throw some answers out. We'll talk about it. Sometimes I'll talk about things like reality TV versus regular TV. What's TV, what's the difference between reality TV and regular TV? In reality TV, they try and put people in situations and just expect them to try and kind of be themselves, where other shows are scripted and they're following sort of a routine. At least they're supposed to be unscripted. Sometimes they're scripted, but we'll talk about just, examples of reality a little bit, but what really we're just trying to simply create a quick definition. What does reality mean? It's what's real, right? The truth. And then I'll say, before we can go on this roller coaster ride, your key to getting a ticket to get on this track, to get on the ride, is I want everybody to identify a goal that you have for your future. And it can be anything that you want, as long as it doesn't hurt you or another person. It needs to be a positive goal. A lot of times I work with students and they have, dreams of becoming, an influencer, a streamer. They're going to be, a professional video gamer on Twitch and or they want to play a professional sport like basketball or football, or, they want to be a rapper, and a lot of times they have these very unrealistic goals, and I don't want to be a dream killer, even though I know realistically most of those aren't probably a reality for them or going to be a reality for them. But as long as I don't want to get hung up on this part right here, as long as their goal isn't something that would hurt them or hurt another person, I'll just go with it. Don't get too hung up on the goal. It's not the key concept that we're teaching here. The key concept that we're teaching here is understanding that their decisions are having consequences, and being able to see how some of the choices they're making today are having an impact on their future. And then we're going to try and help them take some steps for improving their decision-making by paying attention and being more aware of what's going on around them. So just go with it. Don't worry about the goal. Don't get hung up on it. Then if you notice down here on the roller coaster, there are some letters on the wheels, HSP. That stands for home, school, and peers. So thinking about a roller coaster, what do the wheels do for the roller coaster? What do they help make happen? Yeah, they kind of help it move. You might even think about they help it stay on track. Yeah, Jeff, you said they stay on track. So if you think about those three environments, home, school, and peers, with our students, that's usually where they spend most of their time, right? They're either at home, they're at school, or they're with their friends. There may be other environments like work, depending on, the age range you're working with and some other things that they're involved in. But generally it's home, school, peers, and maybe some extracurricular activities and things like that. So we like to think of those three environments as kind of the wheels of the roller coaster. That's what makes the roller coaster move. And if you think of your life as kind of representative of the track that you're on, today you're at one point, tomorrow you'll be further down the track. And it's those three environments that kind of take us down that road or that track in life. And so in those environments, sometimes we have challenges. So what are some of thinking of the kids that you all work with, what are some of the challenges that they might be experiencing at home? What would you say? What would be some of the challenges that they might be seeing in their homes? Jennifer, you said chaotic home life, lack of attention, domestic violence, addiction, so substance use, living between two homes. So maybe their parents are divorced and they're splitting time between parents, or single parent household where, that parent is trying to work hard to make ends meet, but they maybe don't have a lot of time with their parent because the parents is just, struggling to get by, poverty, food insecurity, having a parent that's incarcerated. They may be in foster care system. Um, you have kids that are maybe not really being supported, or there's not a lot of accountability. There's blended families, homeless. I've worked with kids that are homeless, and it's really tough. They just don't have stability. They're being passed around either in a shelter or staying with friends or relatives, and just trying to get by. And I'm amazed they even come to school. It's honestly incredible that they can show up and when they're dealing with so many difficult things at home. What about in school? What do you think some of the things that what would they say if you asked them what are some of the challenges that kids have at school? What do you think they would say? Grades. Um, you guys are saying some things like bullying and fitting in. I would probably put those under the category of peers, but they definitely happen at school. Um, Teachers don't like me. Angela, you said that is the number one answer I always hear from my students. Most common answer, they'll say, my teachers don't like me. And I always think about that and think, is that true? Do we really not like them? I think we can all think of a teacher that makes us wonder why they're in education. But in my experience, I've trained thousands of educators, and I've been doing this for almost, 2.5 decades. And I've trained in all 50 states. And in my experience working with educators, the vast majority do care. But if that's the number one thing that students say when we ask this problem, it's evidence of a problem that exists. We're not effectively communicating often how much we care about them. And that's a big part of everything that we do in our approach to teaching kids and engaging them in WhyTry. We have this concept that's all centered around how to be intentional about creating a positive relationship and communicating to your students that you care about them. But that's one of the most common things I hear when we talk about challenges at school. It's too hard, it's boring, my teachers don't like me. With peers, what are some of the things they may be talking about with their peers? You guys are already saying a bunch of them. Bullying, pressure to do things they don't want to do. They don't fit in. They don't have any friends. They're not being accepted. So when I teach this in a group, these questions are always generalized. I'm not asking personal questions. If I did this one-on-one with a student, this is a really powerful tool. If you're counseling or working with kids one-on-one, if you've got a relationship with them, and even if you don't, it can be a really great tool just to learn and maybe assess what's going on in their life. But it's really powerful. You put this picture, a printed copy of this between the two of you, and you go through asking the questions around this visual metaphor. And it's amazing. It's like the kids' anxiety goes down because they're not, face to face with you, feeling on the spot. You're both looking at this picture and they kind of project onto that. And it's like just talking about this picture makes it easier for them to talk about what's going on in their life. And so a lot of times if you're doing this one-on-one, you may be asking them questions that are directly related to, what are some challenges that you're experiencing at home right now? Or what might be some things that you're struggling with in school or with your friends? But if I do this in a group environment, I would always encourage and recommend that you keep it general so they don't feel that pressure in the group, and that the discussion still is just as effective. They're going to be thinking about how it connects to their life, but we're using examples that are generalized. And so what are some of the things that kids experience, students your age might experience at home, or challenges they might have at school or with peers? That's how we do it. And then don't get hung up on these. Don't spend too much time going through these. We don't really need to analyze why they have these challenges. We're just listing them. And then we can relate it to, it's like the uphill part of this track. Life can be hard when you have challenges. And as a result of challenges, sometimes we do things that get us into trouble. So thinking about that, what are some things that students do that get them into trouble, either at home, at school, with their friends? What would you say in the chat window? Share with me some things that you feel that they do that get them in trouble. See y'all typing away. So a couple of you said quit or risk taking. Try and keep if they give you answers like that, I would recommend come back to quit what? Like, what is it they're doing, or what specific risks are they taking, right? Because you want to identify actual choices that they're making, because we're going to talk about the consequence of those, right? And so you guys are sharing other things like stealing, refusing to work, being disrespectful, maybe in class or to adults, hurting or threatening others. So it could be fighting, substances, drugs, um, not wanting to come to school. So maybe they're truancy, they're skipping school, um, gossiping, cussing, depending on the age, sexually acting out. We might have kids that are, I think you guys said stealing. So you would just kind of be listing a bunch of these up here, and we kind of create a little list. And then I'd say, okay, of all these things here, thinking about this, when kids do these things, is it fun? That's what I'll ask them. What do you think they would say? When kids do these things, is it fun? Yep. Yeah, you're getting it right. I have taught this so many times. They always say, yeah, that's fun. Because if you think about everything we just listed there, they all have a perceived benefit. There's some benefit or payoff with that, whether it's skipping school, I get escape. If it's doing drugs, there's a high. If it's even getting in a fight, there's an adrenaline rush, there's a thrill. So all of these things we're listing of things that kids do to get them into trouble, there is a rush or a positive, there's a benefit to it. And that's like what we represent here. The high part of the roller coaster is the thrill, it's the rush, but everything that goes up eventually what? And I'll pause for a second. And what are they going to say? Everything goes up eventually what? Comes down, right? And so I'll say, look, I want you to be real with me. This is the reality, right? Tell me what you really see. What happens if a kid skips school and they're truant? What are the possible consequences? Give me just a quick rundown real quick. What are some of the possible consequences of skipping school? What could happen? As you're typing, I'll just kind of start answering some of these. Okay, you got them. They're coming fast. You guys are good typers. Getting behind, you're missing out. They're keeping track, right? So they know if you're missing. So it's not like you're getting away with it. Your parents might get in trouble. DCF is involved. You are getting to a point where maybe you're failing and falling so far behind, it may be leading a kid to where they are dropping out. And so what about fighting? What are the possible consequences? What could happen? You could get suspended. You could get hurt. You could get charged with assault. You could be arrested, right? You could hurt somebody else. They could hurt you. What about doing drugs? What are the possible consequences of doing drugs? What could happen? Yeah, you guys are saying death, going right to the extreme, right? You could die. You could get arrested. You could get thrown out of home. You could become addicted. That's an important one, right? Do drugs cost money? Yes. If you're addicted to drugs, what will you do? Just about anything, right? So as you think about this, you just kind of going through any of these scenarios up here and talk about what are the possible consequences. Sexually acting out. It could be STDs, unwanted pregnancy, emotional impact. Some of these things that we talk about here, we can go through and talk about possible consequences over here. Now, remember, I'm saying possible, not what happens, what could happen, right? And then when we list these consequences, I will always ask this question: will these things that we've listed here give you lasting opportunity, freedom, and self-respect? I think we all know the answer is no, but students, when you teach this, it happens all the time. They're sitting there processing this and thinking about, how does this relate to their life? Are there things that they are doing that this doesn't, accurately represent? And so, they're trying to put it to a test and see if it's actually true in every case that they can think of. And whenever they come up with an example where a person is doing this and they're not experiencing these consequences, they love to call it out. I had a kid say once, wait a minute, I know a guy that sells drugs. He gets lots of respect and he makes a lot of money. He has a really nice car and his girlfriend is hot. This isn't true. And if I said to that kid, you're wrong, what would happen? I think what usually happens is they're going to shut down, or they're going to argue with me, or, creates tension, and they're going to disconnect. In most cases, they're going to be like, forget you, that's whatever. You don't even care what I think. And that's kind of what I communicate if I do that, right? I don't really care what you think. You don't know. I know you don't know. And the funny thing is, in reality, in a situation like that, that kid could be right. Maybe it's somebody that they know, and that's the circumstances. They haven't got caught yet. And so, I could be wrong. And I don't, so I'm very careful when I teach this. I try not to use words like good and bad, or right and wrong, because that implies judgment on my part. And that's really not what this is about. This is about their judgment, their decisions, their choices, right? And so usually in a situation like that, I'll just agree with the kid and validate their perspective. I'll say, you know what, you're right. Sometimes you do see people that are doing these things up here, and they're not experiencing these consequences yet, right? That's the key word, yet. But I don't want you to believe me, because in my experience, eventually they'll see these consequences. But don't believe me. I challenge you to pay attention, whether it's you or those around you that are doing these things over here, for the next few weeks. Notice when they do those things, what happens? What are the consequences? And just pay attention for yourself. I want you to see it for yourself. I don't want you to believe me, because, one of the great things about life is that you don't have to do what I tell you. You all agree with that? I mean, we get to make our own decisions. You guys don't have to do what I tell you, and your students don't have to do what you tell them. They get to make their own choices. But I always share this with my students. Even though you get to make your own decisions, you do not get to choose what? What is it they don't get to choose? It's the consequence, right? And you think about that. Is that a true principle? It is. In life, the consequence isn't something we get to choose. If your decision has a potential negative consequence, it's like when you roll the dice. You might get lucky, you might not get caught, or you might get caught. You might end up with a bad roll. And so there's a little activity that I like to do with this one. And I'm not going to be able to do this with you, because you need to be in a, no worries, Jennifer, thank for tuning in. And we'll record, we are recording this, so we'll share the recording with you and the resources with you at the end. So if you need to get the access to what we have at the end, we'll share it with you in an email tomorrow. So activity, count your fingers. This is a fun one. We're not going to be able to really do this virtually, but I'm just going to describe it for you so you could try this if you're doing this lesson. This is something that we do with students where it's great in groups. It is something, if you were just doing this one-on-one, you could play this game with a student one-on-one, kind of as an object lesson. But I'll say, okay, everybody stand up, get a partner, face your partner, and put your hands behind your backs. And then I'm going to say, okay, on the count of 3, we're going to bring our hands up in front of us, and you determine how many fingers you want to hold up. You're going to hold up a certain number of fingers on your hands. And the goal is it's going to be a competition between you and your partner to see who can count the total number of fingers, add them together, and say that out loud. So if you're confused, I'll say, this is what it looks like. And I'll put my hands behind my back, and I'll say, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, say I have 4 and my partner has 3. The total would be 7, right? Got it? Okay. So the first one to say that out loud would be the winner. And so I'll say, okay, put your hands behind your back. So you're ready. On the count of 3, you're going to show your fingers. And usually I'll have some music queued up. So right when I go 3, boom, I'll press play and have some music going. One of my favorite songs for this is, I use the song by Aretha Franklin called Think. You got to think, because that's what they're doing in this moment, thinking really quickly, and it adds energy to your activity. So I'll play that song. And as they're doing this, they're putting, their fingers up. And I usually will also say, be careful, no naughty fingers, be careful which fingers you hold up. But we'll do it. We'll go for 3 rounds. I'll say, who won that round? Congratulations. We'll do it again. Who won the second round? Congratulations. As we're going into the 3rd round, I'll usually say, hopefully each of you have won 1 time. And if that's the case, this will be the championship round. If your partner's already beat you twice, this is just a grudge match. This is for pride, see if you can finally beat them. And then, we'll try it one more time. There's usually a lot of energy. I'll have them give each other a high five and have a seat. And then I'll process with them. We're going to talk about What do we learn from this? What does this have to do with anything we're talking about here today? At first, they don't know because it's just fun. It's quick energy, happens, a little competition, but then we'll process and connect this back to our lives. Now, my question for you, would you say that the students that you are working with are making choices today that are having an impact on their future? What's your answer? Absolutely, right? All the time. Every day, kids are making decisions that are having an impact on what's happening in their future. Sometimes they're big decisions, sometimes they're small decisions, and they have a small impact. Sometimes they could have a big impact, right? So when we do this, I'll say, well, let me go back here. What happens, and this is what will happen when you do this activity, kids will hold their fingers up, and I'll say, look, I saw a few of you do this. I won't point out any names, but I observed a few of this going on. I'll say, when I counted to 3, you went like this. You pulled your hands up and you went and counted your fingers, then you counted your partners and tried to add them together. And they start laughing because they realize that's what they did. Most people do this. You have to understand it's kind of a visual thing. When you put your fingers up in front of you, it's normal to kind of look at yours and then look at your partners and try and add those all together. The funny thing is, this is the first question here. What is the key to success in this game? What do you guys think based on what I described? What's the key to success in this activity? They start laughing because I'll say, why are you counting your own fingers? You shouldn't have to count your own fingers, right? The key to success in this is to know what you're going to do beforehand and not have to, on the spur of the moment, count your fingers and your partners. If you're doing that, you're probably going to lose every time. And so, when we're making decisions that are important decisions, like small decisions, sometimes they only impact us today. I'm not too worried about those. Big decisions, that might have an impact. If it's a negative decision, it has a negative consequence that lasts not just today or tomorrow, but it might last the rest of this week, the rest of this month. It could even impact them for years to come. And so that's where I want to focus on my decisions. Make sure that I'm making good decisions when the potential impact could be long-term, right? That's a big decision. And so one way to do that is what we just did in this activity. One way to improve your decision-making is to think about what you're going to do beforehand. I'll give you an example. If at a young age I decide I'm not going to do drugs, somebody comes along and offers me an opportunity to try some drug or something in my future, I'm just going to say no. I know that's not going to be good for me. Could that be potentially an important decision in my life? Yeah. I mean, that could have a big impact. I just did some training in Colorado a couple months ago in the prison with some of the adult inmates. And so many of them are there for drug-related offenses. And many of them, when we talk about these things, they wish that they would have never done that in the first place. They would probably be in a different situation today than they are. And so, yeah, that could be a really big decision in your life, right? If I make the decision now, I'm just going to say no. It's going to be so much easier in that moment to make that decision that's in my best interest. If I don't make the decision in advance and I'm just waiting on the spur of the moment, there's a good possibility that I might do something that's not in my best interest. I may still say no, but one thing that will happen for sure is peer pressure. And peer pressure is very powerful. It will influence kids to do things that they don't want to do, but they'll do them to be accepted. And we have a whole lesson on that, right? A whole nother approach that we're talking about related to that. But that's an important thing that we're just trying to help them see. This game is a strategy that you can use to be better at decision making. Why can it be helpful to make up your mind before you're faced with a choice that could get you into trouble? So coming back to this, I'm not going to go through the detail of this from here, just give you a quick summary. So we'll go through and we'll talk about, are there things up here in step five that kids keep doing over and over? That's like being stuck in a loop. Are there problems that you keep having over and over? Do you ever feel frustrated, confused, angry, scared, like you're getting the same results? You're just repeating things. You're stuck in a loop. And eventually we all are going to start this ride over. And notice there's two tracks. One's called the easy, fast track. The other one's called the harder but worth it track. If you look at the difference visually, I'll say to my students, what are some of the visual differences? Imagine the words are gone. Just how would you describe these tracks as being different visually? And they'll say, well, this one goes way up and goes way down, and there's a crash and a loop. This one doesn't go quite so high, doesn't go quite so low, but there's kind of ups and downs, and it kind of keeps going forward. They notice that it has a split on this one. There's a sign that says opportunity, freedom, and self-respect, that it's leading you towards those things. They notice sometimes that there's a support here where this one doesn't seem to have any support. It's just hanging out in the air. The crash, they notice the difference there. Sometimes they'll even notice the color change. They both start out kind of the same color, but the easy fast track sort of loses its color as you ride it. And it ends up being just kind of gray and colorless at the end. So we'll talk about kind of what these things might represent to their life. On the easy fast track, this is where you go out with your friends, you do some high risk things. It's a thrill, it's fun, but often that high results afterwards in a low, the consequences, the crash. The harder but worth it, maybe you still go do some fun things. There is a up, but there's also it's not quite so high or extreme, because you're trying to not do as high risk things, but there's also a down, and it's not as extreme either. It's a little more tempered. The easy fast track, sometimes we'll refer to that as immediate gratification, where harder but worth it is delayed gratification. I'll say, which one goes higher? And they'll say, well, this one goes higher. And I'll say, actually, this one does, just over here, not at first, right? We'll talk about who supports you. We'll talk about having choices and options. One's going to lead you up towards your goal. The other one's leading you to a loop. If you're stuck in a loop, you're not even close to your goal. And so we're just kind of making connections to what this might represent in their life. And then I'm going to try and help them see what it's going to take for them to get on the harder but worth it track. What are some things that I'm going to be showing them to help them stay on the harder but worth it track? But the main goal here is just to try and get them to be paying attention, whether they believe you or not, about what you just process with them, just paying attention to their choices and what the consequences are. Because if you want to, accomplish those goals, those things that are important for your future, then we have to stay focused on those. And so that is, in a nutshell, kind of what we're teaching with this. Now, I'm going to share with you all the resources that go along with this lesson. Let me hit escape here and stop share. I'll go back to my web page and share this with you. There's another activity in this that's a fun one called birthday cards. There's a student booster, a resilience booster that we refer to, that's this kind of a journal assignment. And those are all going to be resources that we'll share with you. I'm going to take you to, well, first, let me do this. Better go back and share it one more time here. Not here. Sorry. I'm going to go back to my keynote. Okay. Yeah. So sorry. Let me put this QR code up just so we don't forget. So to access the lesson resources, point your camera at that QR code, and then that'll take you to a little form so we can get your information and send you the resources that we're sharing today. And whether you have the WhyTry program or not, we're going to share this specific application of lesson for you with all the resources that go along with it. And so take a minute and fill that out, or try and capture that. I'm going to also in the chat window, I'll see if I can put a link directly to the form for this. Are you guys not seeing the QR code on the screen? Okay, I'm going to put a link to it in the chat window. So hang on one second. Okay, so in the chat window, if you want to click on that, that'll take you directly to the form here. And Okay, I'll share with you back to my browser. So here are all the resources we're going to share with you. So you have the lesson plan that you can download and view. So this will give you instructions for going through this whole lesson, all these slides and everything that I was sharing with you. There's other activity here, the birthday cards, there's a booster. And so all these resources that are there, what I was just kind of sharing. We also will have a video that you can watch a more comprehensive demonstration video for this. We have a presentation deck. If you're on a Mac, I use Keynote, or you can use PowerPoint on a Windows machine. We have these things, we call them student game plans. This is kind of a way, if you're working with a student one-on-one, that you could go through the experience of processing the reality ride with them, having them fill out these questions that are basically the same questions I was just kind of taking you through, facilitating this. They could complete this, and then we have, along with that, a facilitator's guide to go along with that gives you instructions. You sort of frame it for them, help them understand what this is, how it connects to their life, and then there's processing questions for looking at their answers and discussing it with them. So this is something you could use in a group or a one-on-one setting, but it helps to learn and understand what this is. Or if you're short for time and you just want to try and use this as a tool working with kids. It's something that we see often. Counselors or school psychs will use that as a resource when they don't have a lot of time, but they want to have a kid go through that, and then they'll process with them the next time they meet and kind of look at what their answers were and discuss them in a more impactful way. We've got the different video clips from the lesson that I shared with you. We have a version of the visual metaphor. So if you were going to walk a kid through this one-on-one and you wanted to use this as a tool, you can print this out and you can take them through it. We also have instructions for the count your fingers activity and this other one called birthday cards. That's a real easy, simple, fun one to do, and the resilience booster. And then one last resource here, for some of you that maybe have been using WhyTry, this is new. We have parent resources to go along with these lessons. So if you were going to teach this to a group of kids and then you wanted to send this resource home so the parents could understand more about what this lesson is, the metaphor that we teach, and then some resources to have them help reinforce this at home and see how this is important, and ways that they can support that at home. So it's just kind of a nice resource. Again, you could email this to the parents, or you could send a printed version home with your students if you're going to teach this and try it out. So we just want to show you, if you're trying to deal with issues related to students that keep making poor decisions, are having difficulty recognizing sort of a pattern that they're in, or that they keep repeating negative behaviors, and you want to try and help them be more aware of what's going on and equip them with tools to improve their decision making, we're sharing that lesson with you. So anyway, we're out of time. That went by really fast. We're so grateful that you guys tuned in today. And if you have any questions, feel free to stay on. I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end. But I hope this can be a resource for you that you could take and try out with some of your students. This is typically one of the first lessons we'll teach, and it becomes kind of a framework for a lot of the other skills that we share. And there are so much more in our tools and resources that we're trying to help students understand. And we can apply these just as like a quick intervention to address a specific behavioral challenge or issue, or it could be something that is used in a series of lessons like that. But that is teaching all of these skills of resilience that we have that help put them in a position to be ready to learn when they come to school, be ready to function, even though things in their life are chaotic, or they may have things going on around them that are impacting that. We can teach them skills to be more resilient and be able to deal with those challenges. We can't take the challenges away, but we can teach resilience. That is something that is very clear. And we have an approach to this. We have not only all these tools and resources, but we have training and supports to just help you start where you are, pick a challenge and try it, and pick another challenge and try it. And just keep working your way into this. And then we've got a lot of resources that relate to training. So if you're interested in seeing a demo of this, you want to see more details, you have questions about what this would look like to be implemented in your school or organization, schedule a demo with us. On this landing page, there's a demo link. You can schedule that. We'll have one of our program directors. It's not a sales pitch or anything. They'll go through and talk about what are some of your challenges. What are you looking to accomplish? Just try and discover and understand what you're dealing with, and then maybe help see what we have that could be a resource and a support for you to address those issues. And there's a lot of resources in this that can help address a lot of the behavioral challenges and struggles that we see. So anyway, super grateful that you tuned in today. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to stick around. Lisa, great question. You said, we explain again the easy and hard track information. Yeah, I mean, the easy track represents those things that kids do that get them into trouble. And so we talk about the consequences of what happens. The harder but worth it track represents, trying to avoid some of those decisions that have negative impacts. There's still ups and downs on both. And eventually you're going to be trying to, get further down the track that leads to choices, that leads to opportunity, freedom, and self-respect. And we'll process what those words mean to them and what that looks like in their life. And we process their goal. They're the things that lead you to your goal and what you want to accomplish and achieve in your future. And so don't worry, because the resources I'm sharing with you have all of that in there. And the video will complete the walkthrough. It will help you understand how to process this in the processing guide that's part of what's in the video resources. And then also that resource that I shared, the facilitator guide for doing the game plan worksheet, that also will help you process the visual metaphor and understand the different pieces to it. So there's some really nice resources there to help you see kind of the connection of the metaphor to their life, what the different elements in the roller coaster represent in their life. Anyway, thank you, everybody. We're grateful again. If you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, we'll wrap it up, and you'll be receiving a follow-up with the recording for this and the resources that we promised to share with you.